Korea. South Korea went there in April. This was Sundance 2020 before all hell broke loose.
Or the world collapsed.
It's like crazy. I think that's good. Or should I sit? Should I sit further back? What do you guys think? We good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good experience.
All right. So I'll begin the rundown, and then I'll ask you both to just to say your names and introduce yourselves, and it will begin. Okay. All right. So, 1, 2, 3. Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks. I'm your host Carolyn Hayes, film critic and journalist, and this is the podcast / YouTube channel where I speak to film creatives around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today, I am joined by two filmmakers. I'm the creator and the executive producers of an Israeli series called Bad Boy, and this one it was shocking, but it's also kind of up my alley because I love shows and films about the people. It sounds cliche, but about the human condition. But I love this one because it talks about the stress that teenagers go through in their lives, and I love films and shows that highlight things that teenagers go through, especially the trials and tribulations that adults put them through. So Bad Boy is having its international premiere here at TIFF in 2023. So I'm so happy for you to be talking with me, and congratulations on the premiere. So first of all, please introduce yourselves.
I'm Hagar Ben-Asher, an Israeli, New Yorkish, Tel Avivish, I don't know, filmmaker.
I'm Ron Lesham. I'm a writer.
Right. So as I mentioned, so Bad Boy is about this young. Well, it kind of like time travels a bit because it's about Dean, and it starts out at the beginning him doing a stand-up comedy bit, basically going through his life and using his horrific life experiences for comedic effect, to talk to the audience, and like the people are laughing. But I'll be honest, first when the show starts, I couldn't figure out what language he was speaking because he was going so quick. I was like, is this Arabic? Is it French? I was like, what is he talking about? But then I got into the rhythm of the way he was speaking, and I realized, and then like he kind of breaks it down in the comedy bit, which I think is an extremely good bit of writing, where like he tells you basically that he has ADHD, and he speaks that way because of how his mind functions. So I want you first to talk about making a story like Bad Boy about this, because it's based on a true story.
Yeah.
How it started?
How it started.
It started. Usually, you know this.
His fault.
You're like,
this show. I'll always be crying about. It took so many years, but you know what? This is how the industry works.
Yeah.
I mean, I was always talking about how we were fighting to convince everyone to create EUPHORIA in the US, and in 7 years everyone said no. But then we met, and Dan Levi was fighting for the same years to create Stranger Things, and everyone said no to it. And Matthew Weiner wrote the Mad Men pilot in 1994, and it was aired in 2008. So I can't complain. But it took 20 years, and we were starting. No, I was a 20-year-old journalist, and I was doing a story in a juvenile jail, and I kind of felt that this story must be told. I want to live inside this world much longer, but every TV executive said it. You can't do such a show about kids in jail. It's like the audience is not ready for it. And even when we pitched EUPHORIA the first time, it was kind of this show, but everyone said no to it. But then when the humor tool came as the brilliant moment, we realized that one of the boys became a very successful stand-up comedian. Suddenly we could start thinking of how you filmmake it, right?
And then how did you become involved with the project? From the way you're talking, your camaraderie, you both work with each other very well, and you've been doing this for years?
No.
But I have to say, she said no to every single TV production in Israel in history, because she was just doing her very bold and smart and beautiful filmmaking, but also doing Hollywood shows. She always said, and I know the biggest executives in the Israeli television are always saying, she always say no to anything. It's worth us trying to convince her. So.
No, because working in Israel is difficult for various reasons, but also there was never something that grabbed my attention until Ron came with the story, saying, I want to do a show about troubled kid that gets arrested, taken to juvie, but it's not a depressing, manipulative juvie show, but it's the story of a guy who becomes a stand-up comedian in prison and finds his humor in the worst place a kid could ever be in. And something about, you know, that contrast just left me breathless, and because I've never seen, you know, an approach like this to such harsh content.
Right. And you mentioned a word just now there that I wouldn't have thought of. You said manipulative, like a type of manipulative shows. I kind of have an idea of what you mean, but can you explain what you meant in that context, especially with regards to this type of story?
You know, when you put kids on screen, something there's an automatic compassion, and there's, you know, an automatic you know, will for them to be okay. And then basically as creators, you know, we can do something that will work in a way very easily. You know, Ron keeps saying, he kept saying, we need to avoid doing Oz with kids.
Right, okay.
Because that is just manipulative content, because it will work, but it's also exploitive in a way, and I think it can, you know, it has I don't think it's right.
Right. You mean that, like, sometimes I know what you mean, because you can sometimes when you're watching a film or a show, you can tell when the writers or the directors are trying to get the audience to feel. They're trying to push the audience into feeling specific emotions instead of letting them just develop the emotions naturally. And like, not if the character is meant to be disliked, you're not trying to force them to dislike them. Just let their what's happening inform the way they are. And I agree, and I believe in that, because there are some films and things I watch, I'd be like, especially for instance using a villain, I'm like, I don't want to feel sorry for the villain, because you're just straight up evil and you deserve to be disliked and hated, and you know, and like, but then there's like, they're trying to be like, but understand, I do not need to understand your motivations. You're evil, let it be, you know. So I get with you. And for this show, like, it doesn't feel manipulative, because for like the main character of Dean, he's a very troubled young man. Yes, he has I would believe at that time it's not, it is diagnosed because his mom offers him the medication and refuses to take it. And in him refusing to take the medication, I immediately thought, I understand you're young, I understand you're a teenager, and he's developing his own willpower, he's developing autonomy over his own body and over his own decisions. But in making the decision not to take the pills, I was also like, you're stressing your mom out, you're doing a disservice to yourself, right? So like, I didn't feel guided to like immediately sympathize with him, because I understand like the need, because I have friends who have ADHD. When I was young, I was diagnosed with what did they call it? They called it hyperactive disorder. I haven't been diagnosed as an adult. I probably should go back, but that's what I was diagnosed with as a child. And I also have dyslexia. I was diagnosed with dyslexia at the same time. So there were things that the doctors and my mom wanted me to do, and it would just be like, let me find my own way to get this done, especially with like the dyslexia when I need to read. I had to learn to move at my own pace. But I still had to like listen to the things that I knew would make me better. And Dean is in that point where he has to learn that everything that an adult is telling you isn't for your own detriment, isn't because they hate you, or isn't because they like you, that they want you to be better. But he doesn't understand that. So I want you to tell me about making a character like Dean, about Dean like that, because the thing with Dean is he's not good and he's not bad. He sits very much in a gray line, and we don't get that very often for teenage characters. You know, for teenage characters is very either black or white. It's not very often we get them in the gray area, and especially in a gray area that is very understandable in multiple ways, like I just explained about like his mom's perspective.
And it's a roller coaster what you feel towards him, because you're not really sure. He's a storyteller, so and at points you fall in love with him, and still you are disturbed, and you're not sure. I mean, is he lying? Is he not? Right?
Yeah, I think that in many ways, I mean, I'm very happy with the way that you read him, because in many ways that was our intention, because he's a complicated piece of human being, and that complexity is really what intrigued us, because he's very, very funny, but he's also seeking trouble, He loves his mom. He hates his mom. He wants to be a funny guy, but he hates being a funny guy because he wants to be a badass. He wants to, play with the tough boys, but he also wants to stay home with his mom. So there's something about his perspective on reality, which we felt was different, and that's, I think, in many ways what defined both the writing and the cinematic language.
He's a dichotomy.
Yes.
He's a dichotomy, right? And like he contradicts himself in a lot of ways. And that's an interesting thing for a male character. So another one that's a dichotomy is the character Zorro, who's in this juvenile detention. And it's even really a juvenile detention center because there's a grown man in this same prison, but there's a character, the character Zorro, who's there because he committed an extremely brutal and violent crime. But the way how you introduce Zorro is very different to how you introduce Dean. Dean is straight up with his mom as a teenager, antagonistic, like just straight up. But Zorro, who is in prison for what is established very early a very violent crime, is almost given a very human entry in that he's very quiet. And I think it's really interesting that there's a scene where the other boys tell Dean what Zorro did and how they leave him alone and they shun him because they themselves are afraid of him because they don't know what he's going to do. But I thought it was interesting to have the guard be the person to tell Dean, you can trust Zorro, you can stick with Zorro, that Zorro is going to be the one that's going to shelter you. So I thought it was really interesting to have the guard in particular be the person to say, he may be violent, but this is someone that can protect you and someone who can be there for you. And the way he does it is so smart. He says, just introduce yourself. Just tell him your name and let him take it from there.
Like you're bringing kids to a play date, right?
Yeah.
But and the thing is that because with for a long time I used to think of 15 is the new 25, and 40 is the new 25 as well, right? So you're just kind of stuck in the same place for so long. Because I was thinking, this is it's kind of 25. Like when you're 15, you're exposed today to things that you're not ready. But then working on this, suddenly you realize that 15 is a kid. You don't have the tools to make decisions. It's definitely not the new 25. So in that aspect, and since you want to watch Dean's entrance through Dean's eyes, and he arrives there, and people are telling him this boy is a psychopath and a brutal killer, and then he sees a boy who is the most beautiful creature, funny, athletic, and he said, can it be? So the first reaction is it's kind of being attracted to him. The first reaction is, can it be? I mean, you're attracted to the mystery also, but is he a killer? So we were trying to see how Dean looked at the new relationship, right?
Yeah, I think, and that's an interesting thing because the funny thing, because I was mentioning villains, like you can have villains who are just straight up evil and they don't need to have a backstory. We don't need to know their life. But Zorro he's not a villain to me, but he's a villain to everyone within the show. Like the characters see him as a villain, but he's the one I'm like, I need to know what you did. I need to know how did you end up here, right? But I only got to screen 2 episodes, but I'm like, I need to know more about this character. I need to know what brought this child to the point that he was in, because people will say, okay, he killed someone, and there is no justification for murder, but you want to know what could have been so bad that it brought him to this point, especially at such a young age. And I think the thing with shows like this, especially around teenagers, is so complicated. And I have to say, for what I've seen so far, I have to commend you on handling the story the way you're handling it, because I think you're being very careful, not to be too gratuitous in telling us how violent these kids are, how bad they are, how misunderstood they are, for instance, there's a young character, I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a young character that we're introduced to, and he is kind of like Zorro, but a bit more extroverted.
Yes.
I think he's, and the thought just occurred to me, Zorro is within the prison, but this other character is kind of the person on the outside of who Zorro could have been if he was outside the prison.
Right.
And that's something very terrible happens to that person. But the way you film this, but the way this particular sequence is done is not gratuitous. I love that you didn't make the violence the point of this sequence, And like for this entire show, the violence isn't the point. It's about the circumstances that leads to the violence. So like, how important is it to both of you to make sure that with a show that has such difficult subject topics like violence, trauma, abuse, you know, like gun violence, there's a scene with a gun with that one with the mom. I was like, what? And but even the way it's filmed is kind of artistic and it's not gratuitous. So talk to me about about how important it is to make sure that the violence isn't the point.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, it's always a dilemma. It's a dramatic dilemma because in one, you know, in a very basic perspective, you want to be understandable. You know, you want people to relate to the drama, to understand the drama. So sometimes things just need to be laid out simply. But we thought that, you know, that in this case, because we're basing the stories on true stories, but the true stories are, you know, we don't know if they're truthful or not, if they happened or not, and they are, you know, the fruit of the memory of someone, and they could have been changed, they could have been anything at all. So our approach to the way that we tell the stories was this. We are not signing a contract with the audience saying this is how it was, because this is filmmaking and it's TV and cinema and storytelling. So we allowed ourselves, you know, to have scenes that are a bit surreal.
Yeah. Yes, that one with the gun.
With the
It
gun,
has a very
right?
surrealistic sense to it.
Very surrealistic, and we allowed ourselves to be a bit over the top, and we allowed ourselves at the same time to be, you know, very hyper dramatic and naturalistic, as in the scene that you were talking about, the violent scene you were talking about. I don't want to ruin it. And I think that this dynamic between the genres and between the cinematic approaches, I think that's what eventually makes everything possible. And because we have, you know, humoristic, unreal scenes combined with hyper-realistic scenes, I think that's, you know, our, let's say, magic tool.
And for you, like, what's the same thing about like making sure that the violence isn't the point?
I think for me, it always felt, I know how, from the perspective of the filmmaker who creates this visual philosophy for this, it's the most complicated thing. But for me, it was clear always that it will never be, this is what, when we say it shouldn't be an Oz with kids because it's manipulative. That's the thing. The story has so many other layers that are so important for us and other themes that it was never, we were never meant to be violent. And you need to understand that you need to fill the stakes, because you enter a place where the kids are singing songs from Disney one moment and then killing each other the other minute, but it shouldn't be about violence. That's not the thing. And that's the thing. You are trying to reinvent genres. If you're not surprising, if the genres are not surprising today, then the show is kind of something you've already seen. So that's if you are expecting to get the violence out of a prison with kids, then this is the wrong answer. Right? It needs to be realistic, it needs to be emotional realism, but it never needs to be what you expect to get.
Right, yeah. You can't ignore the violence, because the violence is there. It's like the nature of the beast of where they are. Exactly. But it's about realizing that the violence is just a part of their circumstances. It's not everything around them, because they still manage to find, like, and that's the thing about, like you mentioned, like they're singing Disney songs and then killing each other. That's the thing about kids, and like just like going to like normal everyday, like kids are extremely resilient and they're also extremely adaptable. Right. Like their minds are able to compartmentalize very quickly and very easily, and that's something like where especially experiencing trauma, like yes, they can compartmentalize and like lock away in memory for like years or decades or even forever. But then sometimes it's not only just a defense mechanism, sometimes it's just the way that they think. You know, it's just the way that they just like look at life very simplistically. They're like, okay, so these toys belong to me, so I'm gonna make everything that I love about these toys related to me. Like, you can't play with my toys unless you get to play with me. That's a form of compartmentalization, because they assign like ownership to specific things. It's like if they love colors, they're like, I love colors and I'm gonna make everything about these colors.
Yeah.
So like it's the same thing in this show. And like with Dean, you mentioned before, he's naturally funny, but he doesn't want to be funny. You know, he wants to be a badass, and that's a way of compartmentalizing. He's like, I want to be a badass, and he thinks being a badass means that you can't be funny.
Yeah.
You know, he thinks that being a badass means like walking around with a gun and acting tough, when it's like you are not tough. Like you
skinny white boy.
Skinny white boy. Dude, you need to be putting on stuff. You need to be worrying about sunblock and like sunburn and not worrying about guns. But the thing is, like, he is naturally funny. And the funny thing that when I was watching was like, it's interesting because for a lot of people, they intentionally use humor as a defense mechanism. They intentionally use humor to disarm people, to intentionally get out of situations. But for him, it just comes naturally.
Right.
You know, like when he goes into the main prison, the first time he says, anyone here looking for a stripper? And he's also very quick on the uptick because he mentioned the stripper thing because of something someone has said to him before.
Right.
And he just immediately took that as a part of his vocabulary and say, you know what, I can take this and turn it into a joke. But he didn't even think about it. It just came to him naturally. So talk about developing the humor of this character and developing the humor of this show, because most of the humor, all the humor from what I've seen so far comes from him and just from his natural inclination to like find his observations and being able to find the absurd in the most ridiculous situations.
And I don't know, like, if you thought of it, only here I realized that a lot of people who watch this do not understand that the guy who's playing Daniel, the mature Dean, is the real person.
I was wondering that.
Like,
I figured that because the reason I thought that it was him because, like, as I said, the opening monologue, he's so quick. That came that he was like, that seems so natural. Yes. I'm like, yes, an actor can do it, but I was thinking that feels very natural. And like the way he was looking into the mirror, in my head I was wondering, I was like, is he just kind of like rethinking of everything that he has? And you mentioned like, and we were talking about for kids, like they compartmentalize memories.
Yeah.
And like the 20-year skit is like he's not being forced to face memories that he locked away, right? So like for you, like you said, it's based on a true story. Like, but even then, you don't even know if everything that he told you is explicitly the truth because his memory could have been altered over the years. And our memories do that. Like we remember something very distinctly, but as we get older,
but it's even like science-wise, every time you remember something, you don't really remember it. Every time you get remembered of something, when you touch this page of the book, this page of the book is erased. Yeah. That's the thing. And next time you will, and you rewrite it. You touch a memory, you erased it, the cell in your hand, in your brain, you erase it and then rewrite it. And then the next time you remember it will be just remembering the last time that you thought of it, the last time that you remembered it. Yeah. So basically, you not only when touching it, you spoil it and you put dirt in it and you rewrite it in so many ways, but it's never the authentic memory of it like physiologically in your brain. But the fact that we kind of got to know him as a real character and got to know his humor was suddenly, I think even for Hagar more than for myself, it was writing it was kind of suddenly natural. So you could write his act, like it's him, like the way, because you're sensitive to the way he makes you laugh, then you know how to get into this identity. But we had him, and he was like a huge asset in that aspect because he's the real thing. He's not like nothing else.
Yeah, and it's saying that I want to talk, and in talking about altered memories with regards to age, it's interesting to me about Dean as a teenager too is I think he has a lot of altered memories about his mom because he says things about his mom and like you get the sense that he hates her, and you're like he says things like, she called you, and I'm like, at first I was doubting him, I'm like, but did she? But then I'm like, okay, so maybe she did call the police on him, but she did it for his protection, for his own good, but he doesn't see that. Don't mind never, of course, she didn't anticipate he would end up in the type of situation that he did in that prison, because in her head she's thinking of prison as one thing, but the reality is very different. So like, you can see why he would blame her from the inside, because he's like, this is the hell you put me in, but from the outside she's just thinking, I thought that this would be a safe place for you. It was just kind of like ironic because thinking of a prison as a safe place, but she's like, it would either be that or possibly a mental institution, because people would a lot of people don't understand like things like ADHD and autism and like a lot of neurodivergent conditions, you know. So depending on the cultures of the places, like they wouldn't understand. But like you're difficult, so I'm gonna put you someplace where like country with medication or restraints or anything. So like, I could see where she was coming from. But talk to me again about his perception of his mom. Because we get to see her both be that scene with the gun, like that. I think that's possibly my favorite scene that I've seen. Just not only because of the way it's filmed, but it says so much about her. Like you want to know so much. Like okay, like you are familiar with guns, and like you're kind of a badass. I could see her being like an action figure or like leading a thing. But tell me about the mom and how he sees his own mom and like how she sees him and how she sees herself, because she's very protective of him. Like she cares about him, she loves him. Like she turned up at midnight with she's like, I have a bag and like I need to get this bag to my son, because I got the idea that for these kids in the prison, they see the moms providing the bags as a symbol of love. Right. Because they're like, oh, his mom didn't turn up with a bag for him. Yeah. So like even the most violent ones, they're like, at least my mom turned up with a bag for me. Like your mom did it, so how bad could you be if your own mom didn't bring a bag for you? Yeah.
Me? Okay.
You keep asking after
start.
her first.
No, it's. I think. No, I was looking at him like this because we both have a special relationship with this specific relationship in the show. One loves it for a specific reason. I love it for a different reason, and I think we both care a lot about this relationship. Now, you know, I think in life's court, a mother will never be guilt-free, right? I mean, it's always a mom's fault, and the mother is responsible for everything, and it's almost like the basis of a relationship. I blame you. You try to get clean of this guilt, and I mean, being a mom is basically being guilty from the first day to the last day of your life, and being a child is blaming your parents for every problem you have in your life, and I think that, you know, what we try to accomplish is really to say just that there's no right or wrong. It's nobody's fault. It's everybody's fault. You know, and there's no court in the world that could ever define if a mother is a good mother or a bad mother, you know, putting aside obvious cases. And I think that this fragility of this relationship and the uncertainty that it holds, and you know, and the fact that he sees her as a monster, and he sees her as a liar, and she fears him but she loves him, and this endless amount of emotion, we pretty much allowed ourselves to use it all, to put it all there. And for me, I think, you know, we did a bold, if I may, you know, tap on our shoulders. I think we did a bold decision here, because it's hard to portray something that has so many angles too.
And you know, I never met Xavier Dolan, but I felt envy at him for doing. I am a mommy and I killed my mother. And I always felt like this relationship where you're not even sure, like, is she in her mind, where the single mother living with the child, is he kind of her partner, is he her child, is he like, and you're not sure really if she is sane or not, if she's just having trouble handling his hyperactive disorder, or is she hallucinating when she's blaming him and things. But sometimes they're kind of lovers, and they're very intimate. Sometimes she is his mother, and sometimes he is the man of the house, and I think he passionately loves her in the same way that he hates her, and these relationships are kind of something else. He is obsessed with her because he needs her, and he knows that he needs her, and I think that you're not sure if she had no other choice but calling the police, and maybe she called the police just to frighten him, to scare him. She never thought they will take him.
Especially the way they did, because they just rolled up in there and took him out the house with just his underwear. I was like, first of all, that is a child. Why are you taking him outside in just his underwear? Shame on you.
It's a true story.
That's true.
I know,
It
right?
happened this way. So because he refused to take his bag, he refused to. Because he said, I'm coming back in a few hours. And
So we have to wrap up now. So, but I do want to ask you, what do you think? I'm not even going to ask you what you want people to think about this show. I want to ask you, what have you learned about the show after that it has been made? Because while you're filming and while you're writing, it's a continuous creative process. But once the final cut is made and you saw it at a film festival, you're getting to see it as an observer and seeing other people's observations about it. What have you learned about this show and about this story and about these characters that you didn't know about them before? Because I think these characters are living characters, especially because like you do have the royal dean to work with. Like what did you learn about it?
I think it's the first time. It's the first time people are seeing this. We no one had ever the cast who you met yesterday. The kids. Like this is going to be the first time they see a scene.
Oh, okay. So they didn't get to screen it before. Oh,
so,
okay.
And no journalists, no one saw this before this week. So we are now really kind of exploring the first reactions, and it's a gift, and it's incredible how people are not just diving into this, but really care for understanding the themes and the characters and the motivations. But everyone who talks to us brings some new things to the table and sees it differently. I mean, but we were really afraid of the question of will the humor travel because of language barriers, and will it translate, and can it work in other countries? And it's amazing to see in the first screening the audience laughed.
I think that it's also really interesting to see, as always in every creation, I guess, that everybody finds his own way into it. And what you said today pretty much enlightened so many other perspectives than we ever discussed, so that's really fun, and that will maybe also help us to finish the show.
Wait, why?
No, we're still editing. We're still, No, but so it's actually helpful. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And congratulations on the show. And I really can't wait to see. How many episodes were you intending? 8.
The first season.
Yeah, it makes sense because you got a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Everything.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations to you and to everyone and to the cast.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
So everyone, this was another episode of Carolyn Talks, and this was one of my special interviews for the 2023 Toronto International Film Festival. And in this episode, I discussed the Israeli series Bad Boy, which had 2 episodes screened at the festival. It was co-created by Ron Lesham, who is the creator of the original series that the HBO series EUPHORIA is based on. And we were joined by series director Hagar Ben-Asher, and I'm so thankful for them for taking the time to speak with me about this series. I think we had a really good conversation about the topics that are explored in this series, such as bullying, abuse, neurodivergency, because as is revealed, Dean, who's played by Menaster, is the character has ADHD, and a lot of that informs his behavior, and a lot of it shows why he doesn't think of consequences the way he should, and his relationship with his mother, played by Neta, Plotnik, and she's fantastic. They're both fantastic, and it's going to be interesting to see how the story of Zorro, played by Havtamo Freda, and this relationship between Zorro and Dean. And I'm thinking also maybe Zorro and Dean's mother, how their relationship develops, because her calling the police on Dean has some very unforeseen and violent consequences, and how that's going to affect him emotionally, mentally, perhaps physically as well. And their relationship, and does it make the relationship better over time, or will it make it worse and cause a permanent strain on the relationship? We don't know, and I don't know, because as it was discussed in the interview, this series hadn't been finished editing and being produced while I was talking to Ron and Hagar, so I was very surprised to learn that. But also, as it was revealed in the interview, I guess what we discuss in the interview is gonna perhaps help them to see their series in a different way, maybe approach the remaining editing and production of the series differently. I don't know, but I had a fantastic time talking with them. We didn't have as much time as I would normally have, but you know, this is how it is in festivals. You get like maybe 8, 10, 20 minutes, 30 if I'm lucky with guests, but I always appreciate every minute and every second I have to talk with my guests. And this was a really good interview. And this was also a very busy day. That day I had multiple interviews to do. So it was also, and this one was the first one for that day, but it was really good. And I appreciate Ron and Hagar taking the time to speak with me. And as usual, find the video version of this interview on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Carolyn_Hinds. That's HINDS. You'll find other interviews for TIFF there, as well as the New York Asian Film Festival, which was earlier this summer in August, as well as links to interviews that I did for the Busan International Short Film Festival. The playlist for that, it would say K Crush America. I did because I covered that for K Crush America magazine, which is a digital Asian entertainment magazine. And all of the coverage I did for previous festivals like Sundance, as well as for African American Film Critics Association virtual roundtables, those ones are always fun. Those are interviews that we do with creatives and Black creatives in the film and television industry. And we had some really good ones this year as well. You can find links to all of my published podcasts, YouTube channels, writing, interviews, everything on my R3 page. That's authorly.com/Carolyn Hinds. Find me on Instagram and Twitter at CarrieCNH12. That's CarrieCNH12. I have a TikTok too, but I haven't posted on there in a while. So that's it. And I'll be on Twitter until, to the very bitter end. And I think that's it. I'm going to wrap up now. But as usual, I always like to thank people for listening to my podcast. If you're a new listener, thank you for taking the time to listen to this. If you're a veteran listener, thank you for all the support. I've also recently started adding a GoFundMe link and a Patreon link because it has been a little bit difficult for me financially because of the strike. I wasn't having pitches accepted, which put a financial strain on me. And producing my podcast and YouTube channel by myself, doing all the editing, is very time consuming, but it can also be kind of pricey because I have to pay for all the platforming myself, equipment, and for the programs that I use for the editing and everything. All of that comes out of pocket. So I would appreciate any donations that can be given to my GoFundMe in the link provided in the description box, as well as at my PayPal me. And so that's it. Until the next episode of Carolyn Talks, everyone, stay safe. Bye.